In ascending order in terms of horsepower. So we're going to start with the BMW M4, and it's got the least horsepower of the bunch at base, and that's at 425 horsepower. Yes, with competition trims and CS trims you will go up in power. However, at base, that's what it makes. Now, my friend Jin, who has donated this car for this video, has tuned this car to be just a little bit more aggressive. Now, no matter how you shake it, the BMW is the only one that comes with a manual gearbox. Can't get it in the Lexus, can't get it in the AMG. And I think that's one of the reasons that BMW as a whole has a huge enthusiast following. BMW builds cars that people want to drive. Now, this M4 is turbocharged, and there's gobs of torque all over the rev range. So, it's really important that you manage that torque and how it gets to the rear wheels. Now, in these M cars, you have just the most brilliant M differentials out back, managing your torque, limiting your slip, and putting down all this power. I don't even know what Jin's making in this thing, to be honest, but it's a lot. Now, when you do come to a corner, it's important that your body is composed, and that's really where BMW shines, especially in this M4 as well. You have adaptive dampers, and even in their most, I'm in comfort right now, and honestly I don't think I'd want to go much stiffer than this, especially on public roads. However, when you get this thing out to a track, that's where you're going to want to stiffen it up, and that is where this M4 is going to pull away from either of those other two. Now, with that being said, it's not just about power and suspension, but it's also about weight. This is the lightest car here by 400 pounds on the RCF and 500 pounds on the AMG, and that is why this thing is the enthusiast choice if you're going to autocross or race. Yes, it's got the least power, but yes, it is the most dynamic and the most fun, especially with this manual gearbox. But with that, let's check out the AMG and see how it compares. All right, so while BMWs have been accused of being kind of sterile and soulless, there's absolutely no mistaking the personality behind the wheel of an AMG. Now, before we get into that, I want to talk about weight, because that's what we just ended talking about in the BMW, and this is kind of the weak point of this AMG. This car is 4,100 pounds as curb weight. So, right from the jump, it's flawed. However, when you talk about that personality and we bring that back up, that's when this thing really starts to come into its own. These AMG engines are hand-built in Affalterbach, Germany by a select number of AMG mechanics. It's one man, one engine philosophy, and I absolutely love that. Talk about personality. Now, arguably the previous generations of AMGs, the 6.2 liter V8s, naturally aspirated motors, just absolute cannons. And you could make an argument, I could see that those have more personality, but still, this 4 liter bi-turbo V8 makes 503 glorious horsepower, and it just absolutely revs. And with that, sound is the big differentiator between this AMG and the RCF and the BMW and its turbocharged straight 6. But hey, I mean, that's V8. Now, from that V8, your power will go through a 9-speed speed shift AMG developed transmission. It's actually fantastic. It's not quite the same as the new BMW ZF 8-speed gearboxes, but man, is it quick. Now we'll talk about dynamics, because that again is a big differentiator between this AMG and the BMW M cars, and that's The BMWs feel light, they feel athletic and agile and nimble, and this AMG is more just like a big snowball of power rolling down a hill, gathering power as it just climbs up the rev range. Now these Mercedes AMGs have been likened to German muscle cars, and I have to say that, yeah, that's probably about as accurate as it's gonna get. Name something else that's made in Germany that has a more brutish bellow than this AMG V8. Can't do it. However, it's that personality that kind of makes these things so endearing. There's that character, that personality that really kind of shines through. BMWs are so much about numbers and speed and lap times and 0 to 60s and lateral G that this thing kind of just has its own little kind of way about it. And yeah, it's a little bit flawed. We talked about the weight and the balance before, but man, I can't be mad at it when I hear the V8. Oh, you never get tired of the AMG pull. Oh, it's so fast. And it sounds so good. And with that, let's get into the Lexus. All right. And out of the Germans and into something completely different. This is the Lexus RCF, and there's a reason that the sales numbers on this thing are tragically low. And it's because, as compared to the BMW and the Mercedes that we just got out of, it's not really a performance car. It is to a degree, but it just can't hang in terms of the numbers. Does it have a nicer interior? Yes. Does it have better ride quality? Yes. Is it more comfortable? Yes. But you know what I just described? A GT car. Now, if you want something a little bit more focused, a little bit more tailored, a little bit more disciplined on track, they do make a Lexus RCF Track Edition. However, base to base, this versus the Track Edition, you're going to spend an extra 30 grand. And the fact is, it just kind of adds a little bit of weight reduction. They do a little bit here and there to kind of tighten things up. But the fact of the matter is, and the thing that you cannot escape, is the fact that this is 400 pounds heavier than that M4. So, great, you take 30, 40 pounds out of it, it's still not going to compete on that same level of agility. On a slower road course with more complex turns, it's just not going to keep up. However, let's get back to talking about this RC. Now, under the hood here, we have the only naturally aspirated engine of our bunch here. 5 liters of naturally aspirated, thunderous V8 bellow under the hood here and emit the best sound in the world. The AMG is a little bit louder, it's a little bit more aggressive, but I think tone quality, this might have it. .472 horsepower are pumped out of this thing and 395 pound-feet of torque. That is the big figure that kind of lets this car down, and it's the torque number. The turbochargers on the other cars make the power much lower. It punches in so much harder. You really have to understand where your power band is on this RCF to get the most out of it. It's really nice and it's fun to kind of bang through the gears. The downshifts are crisp when you're in sport mode and you're off throttle. On throttle, they're a little bit slower, but you really, yeah, see, I'm on throttle, downshifting there. There we go, off throttle, down into third, power on, and you just get such a nice noise. And that really, I think, kind of sums up where the value proposition on this car is. Which brings us back to that personality discussion we were starting to have with the AMG. Yes, the BMW is the most sterile. It is going to be the most nimble and the best on track for setting times. However, you don't really form a connection with the car. The Mercedes, you get a little bit more. You get a little bit more theater. You get a little bit more personality and character. But in this thing, I think the thing that really kind of bonds you to the car is the fact that it is flawed. It's too heavy. It's not quite as quick, but it's rare. It sounds amazing. The gearbox isn't bad. I mean, it still makes an effort to be sporty. You have a torque vectoring rear differential that handles power very, very well. You have Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires on here. You've got carbon fiber bits. So it's not like they didn't make an effort to make it sporty. They just it kind of treads the line between GT car and performance sports car. And I think that kind of hurts it in terms of why it's not selling as well and why it loses all these comparisons against things like the M4 or the C63, because it's not as focused. It's so much more comfortable. It's so much more easy to drive every single day. You can enjoy this car more than you can with the M4 specifically. And I think that's why it ends up losing out on all these competitions. And I think it's for those reasons that I've gained such a bond and a respect for these Lexus V8s. So thank you to Lexus North America for making this video possible and giving me this car for the week, because I absolutely love it, despite its flaws. But before we get into final thoughts on these three, I let the owners spend a little bit of time around this RCF so they could give, in their own words, a little bit of their feelings as this car compares to their car.
First impressions, let's see. Cockpit feel, driving position feel, really happy with that. Comfortable seats. I like my seats, but I think extended periods of time, not as comfortable. You got a really good sound. Like you said, don't really experience it until you're up in the revs. You don't really get that grumble at idle, just chilling out. Don't get that notorious V8 sound. Surprisingly, underwhelmingly slow. Transmission seemed to shift very well on the upshifts, but anytime I try to do a down, takes a couple seconds. Can't really compare having the 6-speed manual. I have driven other DCT BMWs like the X5M, X4M, and the M5 Comp. I feel like those are very fast on the up and down. Yeah, I liked it though.
So when we first got in the Lexus, we immediately saw the seats were extra bolstered. When we sat in them, they were very comfortable. They hugged you very well, and they felt like you were in a frickin' cockpit. It was phenomenal. Very, very nice interior, very pretty, nice stitching. Even the stick shift knob was very, very comfortable. Sounded phenomenal, sounded very loud inside. We've definitely enjoyed the ride. Obviously comparing to a Mercedes AMG, it's a little bit different power-wise, but it did have a very nice launch control. We had one launch and it hooked very well with the stock Pilot Power 4S's, very, very nice. Besides that, it handled well in some corners. Didn't go too fast, but definitely handled very well. I like the performance myself. It's about as fast as my other car, so I loved it. Wasn't the same performance profile. They weren't the same kind of twins versus like the M4 versus car are literally twins on the same performance aspect. Besides that, it was a phenomenal drive. Lots of cool modes to choose from, and it felt very, very fun. I would definitely love to have one for a daily. I'm sure there's a bunch of aftermarket on there, just like any other car there is, but definitely for the best thing out of it, I think myself, the seats, interior were phenomenal, and the exhaust tone was absolutely beautiful.
First of all, just let me say that I used to dream about days like this when I first started my YouTube channel. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to drive these types of cars, especially not in the same day. So I would like to thank Jin and Kim for donating their C63S and their BMW M4. Thanks to them for making this video possible. Now back to the test, and here's what it really boils down to in all honesty. We have a spectrum of sportiness right here. The BMW M4 is the most ready to go to the track as it sits right now. The Lexus is the most comfortable, luxurious, and most GT focused, I suppose. And the AMG, in my opinion, is the perfect in-between, combining the power and the performance of the BMW and the stylish luxuriousness and comfort of the Lexus. Now that brings us to the million-dollar question, and that's which one would I pick? And for you, it's going to depend on what your skill set is and where your interests lie. Now for me, I don't go to the track enough and I'm not a good enough driver to squeeze all of the performance out of this M4. So it's just not quite the value proposition that appeals to me. However, if you're going to go to the track, if you're going to autocross and you're going to want to do those things, this is the car for you. Now the Lexus, on the other hand, is just a bit too soft. It's a bit too GT. It's a little bit too cruiser for me. So for me, the perfect balance is struck with the C63 AMG. It's a fantastic combination of character with the hand-built engine, elegant and just opulent design with this beautiful coupe that we have here. Love Kim's wheels, by the way. And I absolutely love the sound that it makes. So for me, the C63 is the car that I could enjoy most day to day. So with that, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Jin and Kim for donating their cars for this video. It's much appreciated. If you like what you saw, go ahead and hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.